Welcome back to It Tastes Like Burning, a fantastic podcast by two volunteer fire chiefs that give nonsensical advice, absolutely terrible recommendations, and the most incomprehensible set of plans that anyone's ever conceived to try and present and follow. So good luck, Godspeed, and hold on. All right, Jesse. So for today, what are we going to be talking about? What do we see that's something that we need to try and share with the masses?
So I think we should talk about positive attitudes and negative attitudes and how people's attitudes in your organization can affect your whole organization, not just that one person, and dive down that rabbit hole a little bit about just the cancer that is a bad attitude. We worry about the other cancer, but that one's the one that'll really kill your whole organization.
Yeah, I can definitely attest, and I've seen it in our organization. I've seen it in other organizations. I've seen it in the politics when you start getting people that are, for lack of better words, going after each other. It can get pretty bad pretty quick, and a lot of it seems like it's not in your control. But in the hindsight and going forward in the future, there's some of that that you can physically take control of and handle yourself. So when you're talking about positive attitude, there's a couple of things, at least in my opinion, that you need to consider, because you have your general atmosphere at the station, your general, we'll call it the atmosphere, professionalism on scene, and then third, kind of how a positive attitude can handle you on the political side of whatever a chief's involved in, whether it be city, county politics, maybe even something bigger than that.
Yeah, and I think it gets back into culture. Like that's the culture you have to drive. And I've got all these. I'm the guy that has a saying for everything, but I truly look at, like, you look at the quote from Henry Ford: "Whether you think you can or you can't, you're probably correct." And that's huge in my world. I mean, that I literally don't look at anything like I can't do it. I mean, everything is possible. I may have to learn something, or I may have to figure something out, but there's no can't. Can't never could. And I think those guys that carry those attitudes, that's a cultural thing that you've got to break them out of those shells of those can'ts and won'ts, and that's below my pay grade, or whatever the thing is that's driving some of that negative emotion and negative attitude about things, which spills over into the greater, you know, detriment to the department, because that you get that one person that goes that way, the next, they influence somebody else, because you you kind of have to pick each other up, but you've got to surround yourself with people that support you and raise you up, but you can't have but a handful of people that you're trying to raise up, otherwise they'll pull you back down. And a lot of guys fall into that. Well, so and so said this thing, and you know I'm going to buy into that theory that this thing that's happening over here is bad, and I don't know anything about it, but so and so told me, and it just grows right through the department or any organization, business, church, life, whatever.
Yeah, the analogy that I've used in a previous podcast is dinosaurs and dinosaur eggs. So you have an established culture in the organization. The membership stays in that organization for X amount of time. In this case, dinosaurs, let's call it the 25, 35 year plus membership. And if you have one guy that literally acts, in a sense, they are a patriarchy type setup. It's your senior guy, wise old man concept. And if he particularly is one that drives a culture of doubt, just general questioning everything, but in the sense of it, not good questions, just being negative for the sake of being negative. And that eventually that anchor's going to get attached onto your newer members. They're influenced by it. So that dinosaur just laid dinosaur eggs. And eventually, like all dinosaurs, they're going to eventually leave. They'll die out, retire, move, on and on.
Attrition.
It's attrition. It's just the way it is. And those dinosaur eggs grow up to be dinosaurs. And the cycle just is going to continue to rinse and repeat. And you can have the exact opposite side of that. At least on my organization, I had a guy that just recently retired, and he is so positive and smiles so much that I question if he doesn't have a central nervous system problem because he just smiles too much. But he's just that happy. He's that positive. He's made that decision to be that guy his entire life. And whereas you have someone that's a classic gray cloud, just, every day's a rainy day, versus someone that, I mean, when they show up, they come bouncing in the door, they're smiling, they're telling jokes, they're telling great stories, they're engaging to everyone. And the entire atmosphere of the room can pivot around that individual and literally change the entire just universal condition and atmosphere of that day in that room. And it could be from something as simple as a 30-second exposure. And it can. You can go on the opposite side of that, where someone comes in, they're negative, they tell everyone that they're an idiot, they're wrong, they're stupid, it's not like it used to be, you can't accomplish anything because you're not awesome like I am, and on and on. How on earth do you expect your membership to be able to thrive off of someone like that?
And it's contagious. It's absolutely contagious. I even catch myself, and I try to be as positive as I can be, and I catch myself falling into it with everything that I know, and I know a little bit more probably than the average guy because I've done a fair amount of reading into like sports psychology and stuff for other parts of my life, and there's some things there that go right along with that with the sports psychology side of things, that if you think you can do it, you can do it. And if you then one of the great analogies from a book that I read with Winning in Mind talks about if you hand somebody a tray of drinks and you tell them I need it over there on the other side of the room, chances are they'll carry the tray of drinks and set them down on the other side of the room. But if you hand them a tray of drinks and tell them, hey, don't spill that, what happens?
Right.
They spill it every time because that seed of that negative thought is planted in their brain, and they can't function. And the same thing happens when you doggedly just berate people for their decisions. Eventually what you get is they no longer have the ability to make any kind of decision. And despite what one of the dinosaurs may think, you don't want a department full of people that can't make a decision. That is the worst possible place you can be, is having a group of 30, 50, 60 people, and only one person here can make a decision because only one person's right 100% of the time.
Yeah, and I can personally attest to the absolute frustrations of something like that happening, because I was in that position, I don't know, let's call it 2 years ago, year and a half ago. Whole bunch of young guys on the department. They're solid. The skill set's there. There's still a lot of learning that they have on scene. But the problem is that I had a handful of people that just absolutely pulled out a baby seal bat and tenderized these guys on anything that they did. Not that it was right or wrong, is the fact that they didn't do it with X, Y, and Z's permission, or the way that X, Y, and Z wanted it done, or anything along that line. And it almost happened immediately, where, Christ, you'd get on scene and you couldn't get them to physically do anything without telling them to do it. Now, if you told them to do it, they do it, and they do it competently, they do it professionally, and it would be done to whatever standard that they felt comfortable with. But it was an absolute battle for about 8 months to a year of getting these guys to realize that you know what you're doing. You have been trained. Go ahead and go do it, because standing there's not the option. It just isn't.
Well, and you take that to the extreme. What if you send them in the front door and they can't make a decision to come out when the roof's falling down? Like, that's the extreme of that deal. But you you beat that out of them, their ability to make any kind of decision on anything, and then they become turkeys in the rainstorm, staring at the sky with their mouth open, drowning.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in training emphatically to the point of where all of your basic firefighting things, hose dragging, pulling hose, tools, use of tools, air pack operation, familiarization with the tick, on and on. That's muscle memory. You are not thinking about doing those things. You just do those things. And if you have someone to that level of competency, and I'm going to say being comfortable enough with their equipment and with their surroundings and with their fire behavior knowledge and with their building construction knowledge, that it actually allows the individual to do we'll just say for this scenario, an interior attack, and they're doing everything already what they should be doing to search for victims, put the fire out, start ventilation, and it actually frees up their conscious thought for paying attention to their surroundings and what actually is going on around them and getting some sensory data input and interpretation to be able to actually start paying attention to the entire story being told. Fire's too big, fire's too small, smoke buildup's too much, heat's too high, and on and on. And they're able to make an exceedingly important and competent decisions while on the hose line. And meanwhile, they never once actually thought about straightening out the hose, how to do forcible entry, how to do a search, and find the seat of the fire. It just happened, and it frees their brain up to actually do the true critical thinking that's involved in this.
And that's the same in any skill that you're developing, because your mind should not be on the task that you're doing. It should be on the next task, or the what's fixing to happen, or the what's coming up. You should be looking into the future. It doesn't matter if you're building a doghouse. You should, while you're nailing the frame of the doghouse together, you should be in your mind already to the siding or the roof. Like, that's just how it's supposed to work.
Right. And the point that needs to be connected here is, how does a positive attitude have an impact on anything like this on a fire scene? If your membership is coming from the perspective of particularly conflicting information, that I only have to do it this way with this guy on this certain scene because he's here, or I'm going to get chewed out. And then when you have another call and you have another guy with a very specific way that he has to do it, and he starts clubbing them because they're not doing it his way, that's not going to work. You are begging to have a catastrophic problem off of that. And the absolute worst case scenario that comes out of that is the membership just says, screw it, and they bail on it, and then they just start doing their own thing. Then you go down the freelancing path, which is arguably even worse yet, and it cascades from there, because now they don't want to tell anyone what they're doing because they're doing what they think needs to be done. Meanwhile, command or the engineer or whatever the setup is, they don't have a clue. They think the interior crew is, going to pull the hose and go on the delta side, back side of the house, and come around and, do an entry that way. Well, meanwhile, they just went to the front door, went in, and truck positioning, and no one has a clue at where they're actually setting up for that exact moment. And it just cascades from there.
And that's that's one of the things I'm real critical about post-incident critiques and that aspect of it, and why you won't hear us doing a lot of that armchair quarterback stuff on this podcast, is because you're in hindsight looking at something through a different lens than the people that were looking at it at the time. You have a whole different set of information, plus you know what the outcome was. So how do you just beat somebody up about what they saw and what they were doing when you weren't in that time or place? And I'm not saying that you can't have a post-incident review or talk about an incident after the fact and what could have went better and what didn't go good. But I think you can't limit it to what went wrong. You have to embark into that what went well.
Yeah, I'm in the exact same duck pond as you on that. I think post incident critiques, particularly at the firefighter level, are kind of meaningless. And I do mean meaningless. Where I do have value is we're on scene, the call's done, we're wrapping up, everyone's ready to go. Then go over there, grab their mitten, and start right where they started. And say, okay, you pulled the hose from the truck, you ended up here. What'd you see? What'd you smell? What'd you taste? Why'd you do this? And it's not to sit there and say, oh, you did this wrong. No, you need to do it this way. Get their mindset, understand the logic at why they did what they did. Because what you can do from there is if you prefer to see it done a different way, you can ask, have you considered? What about? Did you try? If you go that way, then they can sit there, have the scene fresh in their head, and then actually tell you X, Y, and Z as to why they didn't do that, they didn't think of it, or why it wouldn't work. And what you're building is a, for lack of better words, just that professional relationship and a modicum of trust, where you're engaging your guys. They understand what you're doing and how it benefits them. And it's not to sit there and just bash them. That's the absolute last thing that needs to come out of this. I mean, short of someone getting killed or truly just KOing a piece of equipment, outside of that, there is no reason for that discussion to be anything more than walk through the scene, bounce ideas off of each other, and maybe give them some different critiques. And that's it.
Yeah, there's tons of teachable moments, and there's a lot of difference between a teachable moment and just beating somebody down. There's a huge difference there, and in that teachable moment, you should literally be trying to teach somebody something. You don't tendency to learn is not from I got beat to death by this thing. That system of learning is not that works for 3-year-olds. None of us are 3-year-olds. Works for dogs, works for horses. It doesn't work for grown men that have all the things that go along with that, or grown women that have, egos and everything else that plays into their thought process, and you can't just beat them down for no reason.
Right. And, when we say a positive attitude, positive encounters inside your departments and on scenes, we're not necessarily just talking about being positive, joking the entire time, and being lighthearted. A positive reinforcement really can happen, particularly in training. That's one of the reasons that we do our walkthroughs after a significant call, because at the end of the day, if you truly understand training and the value of training and what it actually accomplishes in your organization, it is training is the heartstrings of your organization. And you'll never be able to convince me of that otherwise. I can tell you as someone who's done a ton of training, ton of instructing, thousands and thousands and thousands of hours as an instructor long before I ever joined the fire service. And you will gain a rapport with the membership if you do good training. And it's not just a PowerPoint to death. It's not the same thing over and over. And you'll be able to build up your department through that training. And I mean substantially build up the department. It won't happen overnight. In our case, I would argue it took about 8 years. And that includes hundreds of hours, well, thousands of hours just physically teaching, hundreds of hours doing the skill side of it. Then you have lectures, and then you have to build the class. And if you build all of that under the concept of positive reinforcement, positive skill building, positive critiques, the compounding benefit of it is exponential. And you don't have to be a catastrophically busy volunteer department to sit there and use that as the basis for why you're doing training. You might be a very small department and have a very small call volume, and you can't tell me that training's not important to them.
I can tell you one of the craziest ways to gauge whether your training program is successful and you're working right. Do your members or students or whatever they are, rookies, do they come and ask you questions? Because if they're not coming to ask you questions, they either A, think you don't know the answer or you're an idiot, or B, they're too scared to come ask you the question. So you can gauge a lot by whether they engage you and ask questions. Now, some of the questions are not worthy of being asked, and that may be your fault too for not teaching the materials well enough. But when they're legitimately thinking about what you're teaching them and thinking about the events around an incident, there's gonna be questions. They're gonna want to know, why did that do that? Why was this way? Why did you choose a 2.5 over an inch and a half? All those questions that they should have, because those are that brain sparring, spark of knowledge kind of deal. You should be approachable enough that they want to ask you those questions.
Right. And let's just go down the rabbit hole on that real quick, and let's pretend that maybe we have one of these people that's rarely listening to us and is sitting there saying, "Well, that's not me. They're not talking about me." Let's actually address who that individual is. And it really comes down to it. Antisocial people, if they're positive to be around, magically people are around them. They may not contribute much to the conversation, but they will talk occasionally and they will be part of the conversation. If you walk into the fire station and all the people leave, you need to take that as a universal sign that something's wrong. Okay? And you need to be truly honest with yourself. Is it because they're all stupid and young? Or is it because, frankly, you're an ass?
Yeah.
And no one can stand to be around you? And the fact of the matter is that you might be the single most valuable person on that organization. Unequivocally. You have the most experience, you have the most knowledge, you have the most education, and you have the most time on scene. But if you're an unsufferable SOB and all you do is criticize everyone around you, everyone's wrong, everyone's flawed, everyone did everything wrong, no one can do anything to a level that you are capable of. Magically, no one's talking to you, no one's affiliating with you, no one goes to you with questions. People are avoiding you when they should be coming to you with important things. That's your sign. And I hate to say it that way, but that's just the fact. Is that it's self-reflection. And I'm not saying that you need to be like my guy that I talked about that is just ungodly positive and all he does is smile and tell good jokes and everyone wants to be around him. I'm not talking about that. We're still talking about the positive reinforcement that people get from you, because you still may ultimately be a complete source of knowledge, but if people don't appreciate the interaction and they want to have nothing to do with you, then they're going to have nothing to do with you. And frankly, they'll go ask their questions to someone else.
And that goes back to my common saying that we're literally here to find our replacement, train them, and we haven't succeeded if we're not making somebody to take our place when we leave, because we're all going to leave eventually, whether it's on our own accord or death or whatever. We're all not going to be here forever, so we have to do our replacement. We have to train our replacement. And it's not my knowledge. I have knowledge, yes, but it's not my knowledge. It's our knowledge, and it's mine to share, and I'm happy to share it. As far as training and all that, that's what you should look at.
That's a really good point. I'll tell you one thing that absolutely, God, this infuriates me when people take their knowledge and their experience, and this isn't just on a volunteer fire department. This is anywhere. Okay, I'm not asking for intellectual property on your Fortune 500 company, but if you have a legitimate knowledge, experience, something to contribute to someone that's a benefit, and you use that, for lack of better words, as a hostage and dangle it in front of people, like, well, you can almost do it this way, but Al, I'm not going to tell you.
That's terrorism.
Al,
That's what it is.
that's absolute garbage. And if you are that person, stop it. That's asinine to sit there and take your knowledge on, and I'm just going to do something completely absurd. We'll say it's a very specific facility inside, your municipality, in your county, and you know that it's a fire hazard, and you know the particular layout, and you know everything there is to know about that building, but you won't tell anyone anything about that damn building because, well, that's yours. That makes you relevant. And like I said, that's a terrible example, but I'm just using that as an example. Yeah, real good example of that is at the station. So you got a group of guys, they're out there working on trucks. Someone asks you a question, and you sit there and say, well, you're too stupid to understand how to do that. And then you don't show them. Give me a break. Get over yourself.
Yeah, you're not that valuable. You're not that important. Let's talk a little bit about just the generally good guy that comes in and is having a bad day. What do you do with that guy? Because that guy happens a lot. He's normally a good, easygoing guy, but today, his dog got ran over, and his wife left him for the mailman or whatever. How do you deal with that guy? Because that guy's a different animal other than the guy that's just generally always negative.
Generally, at least from my extremely biased opinion, if they're at the station, they've done two things. One, they're looking to get away from their problem for that minute. And two, the station's not a place you go to meditate. They are looking to talk. Doesn't mean that they're necessarily looking to talk to you about that specific problem, much less your opinion on how to address that specific problem, but just talk. And if you can sit there and just give them the comfort and peace of mind of being able to physically just escape for a little bit from their difficulties, troubles, problems, that in itself is an exceedingly valuable thing, and you're going to build that personal relationship a little more. The big thing I would encourage everyone to not do is sit there and pry. It'll come out if they want to talk about it. I assure you. Now, let's say that problem manifests just a little further down the road, okay? And it's still a problem. And now they're having the snappish attitude with the membership, and it's continued to, for lack of better words, spiral out of control. Then at that point, I would be really getting serious about sitting down with that individual and just saying, look, what on earth is going on? And particularly as chief, then at this point, and I know not all organizations are created equal, but there are resources out there. And sometimes it's doing your best impersonation of Dr. Phil. And other times you realize that there's a time that you're like, look, we can call the cavalry for you. We can help find a solution to this. I may not know the answer, But if you're willing, let me reach out and let me see if I can find someone.
And I'll tell you, you know, if that person comes in and they're beyond that, just trying to find an escape, or they're would truly be hazardous on a scene. I've done it, and I would suggest other people do it. Take them out to eat, get them out of the station. You and them go eat dinner, do something. Just say, "Hey, man, I'm hungry. Let's go," and give them some time to, on their terms, tell you what's going on or whatever, and just listen. I mean, a lot of times guys just need an ear for some of that stuff, and or need to vent, and everything can go back to normal. But get, if there's 4 or 5 people hanging out at the station, that may not be the best place for them to confront whatever's bothering them, and have that conversation amongst many ears. Sometimes that stuff's a little more private, and it doesn't have to be the chief or the captain or the lieutenant. It could be a fellow firefighter that says,
Right. Well, and sometimes even the chief or assistant chief officers can exacerbate the problem because they just don't want to talk to the administration about this. And granted, we're volunteer and we're not going to necessarily fire anyone over something that's related to HR directly, but there's just certain things. Everyone has that thing that's personal. They don't want to talk about it to their boss, their administrator about that. And that's where, you know, as a chief, you can sit there and kind of realize that maybe something is going on here, and then either send a text message or kick one of the guys under the table in the leg and tell them, like, hey, go get something to eat, go out, whatever. Maybe it's a night out on town, whatever.
it's just something to make that not a dangerous situation, because it can be. I mean, I, there's a whole nother topic and a whole nother deal in some of that, but we'll veer back out of that realm. But try to always be the diffuser of the situation, not the protagonist of it, and that's the point that I'm trying to drive. Don't be that guy that's just making it worse. Oh, I can't believe they did that to you. I can't believe blah 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 blah. You should, and get revenge or whatever the thing is, because that guy's just as bad as the other guy and maybe worse.
Yeah, it's you got to be careful. It may at all face value appear to be a rather mundane problem, run of the day problem, run of the mill problem. And we've all got issues, complications, difficulties, and varying levels of stress throughout our life. And, today's not the day to add something else to an individual. And particularly, every department has one. They've got a drama queen that'll sit there and stoke that fire. And they don't even realize what they're doing.
And
And,
that's usually the same guy that, you know, could never let himself be happy. Like there's got to be something wrong with every situation.
right.
That guy and the drama guy are the same guy usually, and they literally could win the lottery and be pissed off because they had to pay taxes.
Yeah, it's staggering, again, to kind of stay on point, at how much the general attitude inside the station at any given time, when you have people gathered there, can sway off of people's body language and emotion. And you have it when people walk in and they're already furious. You can tell. Now, there's some people that walk around with a permanent scowl. That's me.
Yeah.
And that's just the way I am. But generally, vast majority of the time, I don't just come to the station to just generally vent and blow up on someone because they're there and by God, I'm going to do it and I'm chief and I'm going to tear them apart. And your body language and your disposition can really affect the an entire room.
Yeah, for sure. And it's it goes way beyond that. It goes into just the sake of being. And let's jump back to that guy that's the antagonist and the guy that's always nothing good could happen to him. That guy can wreak so much havoc on your organization from the sense that he's always going to go between people and try to separate bonds. So you have those, and I call them cliques. I mean, they're essentially cliques of groups of people that gravitate towards each other, and it's not necessarily a bad thing as long as they're gravitating towards each other because of common interest or whatever. They're not gravitating towards each other to form a alliance to destroy the world. It's not bad for the young kids to hang out together and the older guys to hang out together because we are different in that aspect of just interest and conversation and stuff like that. I don't care what the TikTok thing is. It doesn't matter to me. But you get that guy that tries to drive that wedge in between those groups of the young guys, especially because the old guys are what they are and they don't care. But they try to go in there and say, "Oh, so and so was said this about you." Well, they may have said something about you, but it's kind of like the telephone game when you start on one side of the room and you say a sentence, and then by the time it makes it around, it's a completely different thing. That's happening in real life all the time because it always gets altered and changed. The thing that somebody said could have been a positive thing, but by the time it makes it back around, it's, I want to kill your mother.
Yeah, I'll give just a real quick story on that. So, I ruthlessly make fun of people, and it is in nothing but good fun. Because if I truly have to say anything to anyone, I pull them aside and say something. And it's incredible at how many times I've had someone on the backside, to their credit, actually say, "Oh, you said this." Okay, yes, actually, when you put it that way, yes, I exactly said that. But let's put some context on this. Okay, this is what we were talking about. This was the scenario. It was a joke. And I fully expect everyone to tear into me also. And you got to be careful because, again, you get these people that think they're doing everyone a service by taking particularly firehouse conversations because they can get pretty wild pretty quick. And people take something that's a joke, and it is all it is a joke. And someone takes that as a leverage piece and they'll run over and go tell someone else that you said that. And yeah, I mean, technically, like I said, I won't dodge it. Yeah, I said it, but this is the context. It's an entire joke. So,
Yeah, and I think the joke's more important, and the lightheartedness of the situation is more important. Just dealing with the things that you deal with. I mean, we're all any of us that have been here longer than 10 minutes have a dark sense of humor. We're somewhat jaded. All that stuff plays into it, and we can joke about the things that the average public would just cringe over. And that's just part of being a first responder in general. I see it all the time. It's normal behavior, and that's a coping deal. So you can't take everything as just literal because most of it's in a joking context.
right. And just, I probably should have just told my entire scenario. I should have actually just told the story. So here's the story. There's a group of young guys sitting with me at a table. We are talking about jobs that are in our city's area. And several of my young guys right now are actually applying and trying to make careers out of this, which is awesome. Our department's a AAA baseball team from a volunteer fire department to career, where we're definitely a stepping stone. And one of the guys that's applying, it's not that he's getting killed in his interviews. Any young man's going to get destroyed in his interviews, period. You just don't have the life experience to be able to handle an interview when you're sitting down with guys that have got 30 plus years on a job. If they want to pick on you, they're going to be able to decimate you in seconds, and there's nothing you can do. Well, this poor guy, he's had a couple of interviews, and that's all I was making jest of. He's kind of stoic. All young men are arrogant and cocky. And my statement is that his struggles in interviews is because he comes across as a serial killer. And it's just because of his personality and disposition. When he's around anyone that he sees as a authority figure, he stiffens up. That's it.
Yeah.
And that got twisted and turned back. And it was like a few days, weeks later, sitting at the table again. And this guy, I don't even remember exactly how he brought it up. But to his credit, he brought it up. And he brought it up kind of very indirectly. And I mean, I knew exactly what he was talking about. And I just told him, I'm like, look, your interview prep is garbage. That was the gist of that. And if you want to have better chances, better odds, just better experience at these interviews, one, keep going to them. That's the first one. Continue to get the experience. And two, this is the critical part of this, offer to help.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's all in that lift them up kind of voice, and I wouldn't say I preach it, but I directly encourage people constantly to lift each other up. And I still poke and prod and have fun and pick on people. Don't think I don't do that. I'm completely capable and enjoy doing it. But at the same time, I can pick on this person 1 minute and turn around and go, hey, let me show you how this works the next minute. And it doesn't matter because it's just fun and games and me being who I am.
Well, again, humor's a bridge.
Yeah.
You can find commonality in humor.
And the other thing is, don't have your damn feelings stuck out so far.
Yeah, that's unfortunately, I think every organization on the face of the earth is always going to have a problem with that. And again, this kind of goes back to that firehouse discussion, table discussion. Boy, people get comfortable with each other, and they start shooting their mouth off. And the fact of the matter is how well do you know that person? And I've definitely seen it, and I've taken action a handful of times on people that start shooting their mouth off. And it's pretty incredible because they don't even realize what they're doing. I can say this from a Chiefs perspective. I highly recommend pulling out the baby seal bat and just squashing that right there.
Yeah.
Killing it right now. It set the boundary because how can you expect people to operate in a white box if they don't even know where the lines are at? And those lines can get crossed really quick, really, really, really quick. People just don't understand what they have around them. And I'll tell this story. This is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. So we have a member who's got one of the wildest, most incredible childhood stories, and he immigrated to the U.S. and came to the U.S., fully working American citizen now, has a family, joins our department, loves firefighting, goes off and ends up applying and getting hired on at a big department. Guy's just a workhorse. Great personality, great character, great disposition. There's not a single thing that no one would want that this guy doesn't offer in your organization. And at his career job, they're having a tabletop discussion, and they don't even realize that this individual has a personal experience in the opinions that they're expressing on religion and geopolitics and just the world in general. And that could be and was a problem. And it's just as simple as, just because the front door at the station's closed does not mean that you're not literally walking into a boiling pot of oil.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. There's so much more to all of this that it goes everywhere. But the one main takeaway that I want our listeners to take away is in that team dynamic, because we're truly trying to build a team, and we're not a pee-wee baseball team. We're not, your kid's little basketball team. We're building a team of people that truly are relying on each other for life and death stuff. Like, you're going to places to save people's lives. You're relying on each other to save each other's lives if the thing comes in, and you can't plant those seeds or those dinosaur eggs or any of those things of that negative impact, because at some point when old Billy Bob gets torched off, are you gonna go, oh shit, that was bad, or are you gonna go, he was an idiot anyway? Like, where are you gonna take that?
Yeah, no one person can accomplish anything significant by themselves on a fire scene, rescue scene, medical scene, whatever. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure you're sitting there thinking to yourself right now, well, I went and did CPR on X, Y, and Z and saved their life. Good for you. Sure would have been a lot easier if you had a team of people behind you.
Yeah.
You'd have been able to do more.
Just because you can do something doesn't mean that's what you should do.
Yeah.
That's true in life a lot of times, I can do a lot of things. I'm capable of doing a lot of things. I shouldn't do most of them.
Yeah, at the basic end of the day, fire departments have a very positive, just public image of them, period. Okay? Just by consequence of having a positive public image, you're expected to be positive in your interactions with the community. And when you're not positive, or you don't give them the theoretical answer that they want to hear, that automatically causes issues. And that same concept applies inside the firehouse. How do you accomplish anything if people don't have a commonality, respect for each other, the ability to listen to each other's opinions, and find value in critique, but also find value in knowing that you're wrong, or when you're wrong, or how you're wrong? These are important things that for the true health of the organization really need to be in place.
And that person that has that soured attitude or whatever, realize that every member of your department, this department, any department, every member of that department's the face of the department. And so is that the face of the department you want interacting with your public? Because at some point they're going to be interacting with the public. It's inevitable, whether they're a rookie at a kindergarten class or whatever it is. I mean, they're interacting with the public, and if that soured attitude is what comes through, then that's what your organization becomes, because perception is reality, period, in the public eye. I mean, that there's no way around that. And if you represent yourself with one negative attitude into the public spectrum, that's what your organization just instantly became.
Yeah, and then go kind of kick back on, we were talking about that guy having a bad day, comes up to the station. His bad day spills over into the other people that he's having the discussion with at the station. Tempers flare, people get angry, then they go on a call. Yeah, it just perpetually gets worse and worse, potentially.
Yeah. And so you need to try to control that to the extent that you can. And we're not talking about an easy thing to control. This is level 10 type stuff.
Advanced junior woodchuck classes are required.
Yeah, this is not an easy task, and we wouldn't be talking about it if it was easy, because everybody'd have it figured out.
Right.
And we're not saying we have it figured out either, because a constant thing.
Yeah,
And every situation's different.
and it's always going to be growing and developing. And the fact of the matter is if we happen to have any other young chiefs out there, that's not a young man's game plan. Particularly when it's young man versus an older man. Or the flip side of that is if you're a young chief and you have a whole bunch of guys that are your buddies that literally work below you. There's some interesting crossroads that kind of get thrown your way coming off of that.
And a lot of that stuff can be overcome just with the respect that you can gain by being that beacon of positiveness and constantly trying to lift people up and use those teachable moments for positivity, because that path right there gains you way more respect than the path of I'm always right and you're just going to do it because I said.
Yeah, that I had one person tell me that once. I literally laughed in their face. They had no clue what my background was, what my experience was, and I was new on the fire department. I literally wrote that person off the second they said that.
Yeah.
It was the catastrophic damage that statement did in that scenario was truly permanent as far as our quote unquote relationship was related, because there is nothing in the world where this statement of I know what I'm talking about, you don't, so you need to do it, ever needs to be made. And there's a big difference between a chief giving someone an order and then someone who needs clarification on an order.
Yeah.
There's a big difference there.
Huge difference. And there's also, I've always looked at it through the lens as I'm not going to ask somebody to do something I wouldn't do.
Right.
And does that mean that that's something that I do all the time, or no, but I would do it. I'm not saying that I always do it. I'm not the guy that's always going to run back to the truck and get the axe, but I definitely would go do that. Like there's nothing that's below me in any of this. Like I'll clean the toilet. It doesn't matter. And that's one of those things that you can't let fester either, is that job's below me, or I told you to do it because I said that whole mentality there. You can't let that mentality fester. I mean, even if you're the chief and you're delegating stuff, have in the back of your mind that you could have to do whatever that task is too, and would you do it?
Well, and again, that's a compounding benefit. If you are literally the chief that cleans the toilets at your station, no one wants to do that. Okay, they do it. They do it because it's a task. Okay, but if you're literally the chief that scrubs toilets at your station, the political gold of that is invaluable. One thing I do want to talk about before we kind of finish this up is I want to talk about the positive attitude kind of on the political side.
Yeah.
And working at the administrative level. Okay. There are opportunities that are presented to you at times when you do have a group of people, okay, politicians, whatever. Maybe it's an HOA, or I'm trying to think of some other obscure entity that you would have to deal with. Maybe it's a private industry that's very large in your area. School district, yeah. There's an opportunity there if you come in as the one that's willing to work and listen. And it's not necessarily make the compromise, but find the compromise. And the benefit of being the person that when you walk in the room, people take a sigh of relief because they know that you are going to add something that's beneficial to the discussion. And they may not even be able to come to an agreement on a single thing, but they know that they're going to have a beneficial discussion that comes out of it with more people actually understanding all sides of the argument, issue, problem, solution, whatever it is.
Yeah, and just the fact that you're willing and trying to find that solution no matter what it is, just that willingness to embark into that journey to find that solution is worth its weight in gold.
Yeah, there's a huge amount of political capital that you can gain by being the chief, assistant chief, even arguably your officers that's willing to come in and have not necessarily easy discussions and be able to get people to sit down and actually listen to arguments. There's a huge benefit to that. And if you're willing, it's not easy. It takes time, energy, and effort. It's particularly more difficult, I would assume, if you're a established chief and you have been confrontational's not the right word, but if you have the reputation of being uncompromising, unwilling to work with, difficult to work with, that's kind of a harder turn to make. If you're a new chief coming in and you have that scenario set up, I would tell you to run with it because it's actually set up to your advantage.
Yeah, and you've always got to remember, and that even in those situations, you've got to put the department ahead of yourself,
Right.
100% of the time, and realize, because I've been in those situations where it had to get bad, it had to get dirty, and I had to win. Like, I had to win whatever this argument was, because the consequences of the political other side of it winning was the destruction of the department.
Yeah, but did you kick in the door and just say F you and then flip them the bird and stomp out?
No.
No. No, that's not going to work. If I had to guess, truly not knowing, you probably had, I don't know, some stats, data, figures, justifications, presentations, on and on.
Yeah, no, for sure. It
Yeah.
was well thought and well planned, and more to the side of sometimes it wasn't all positive, and that was the thing. Sometimes you had to get a little bit negative and paint those people in a bad light to get the public to rally around you, because the public's always going to rally around their fire department because they love us. We're their heroes. I mean, heck, they made us so that cops could have heroes.
That's right.
Yeah. So they're always gonna the general population is gonna rally around you, and sometimes in that political realm you have to play the general population against the politicians to get where you need to be.
And don't take criticism or I'm going to call it confrontation as an assault on your character, personality, or, your life choices. There's nothing wrong with someone in the community, your local government, having questions. Okay. That is your opportunity to go out there, go track them down. That's the hard part. And then physically take the opportunity, and that's what it is, the opportunity to take someone that was a antagonist and turn them into an ally. And if you're able to do that, you now have one of your theoretical most vocal critics that's now one of your biggest allies. And the payoff on that is truly compounding and exponential because they will go to bat for you.
Every time. Every time. And we'll segue into another little deal. And, the guy that buys into some of that negative stuff. And I want to touch on this in the political realm. So we hear all the time, and I hear it, and I've heard it for years, that volunteerism is dead. You're a dying breed. It's going away. We're gonna replace you guys with more paid guys. I've seen it in real life. I've seen, a paid staff of one per shift go to 5 per shift, and as that happens, yes, the volunteers go away, but the volunteers go away because of a failure on our part, and it's because we bought into the thought that the volunteerism was dead, that all these things that we can no longer do the job. We didn't step up to the opportunity. Instead, we just took the negative side of it and accepted it as fact. And so sometimes you can't accept the negative as fact. The negative is not always fact. Sometimes the negative is the opportunity for you to have a more positive impact and grow past that. And that's one of the things that I think is the root of what we're talking about on all these podcasts, is how we overcome some of those negativities that are not just us, but they're out there in the greater population, and nationally or internationally, or however far that reaches, of the death of volunteerism. Because I don't think it's dead. I think we have failed to keep up with the demands of our department. Sometimes we failed to recruit adequately for the volume of people we need. We failed at all those things, but we haven't failed at the training sides of things. We've trained people to higher levels. We've become more professional in the manner in which we do things. The equipment's better, the blah 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 blah. But we accepted that fact that's not fact.
Yeah, I mean, the core issue of all of this, to me, I mean, it's real simple to say that this is the problem. Now, the solution to it, and we'll have many more podcasts about the solution, but the solution is figuring out how to communicate effectively. That's the solution. I refuse to believe, I don't care how big or small your town is, if you've got a volunteer organization, I refuse to believe that there's no one willing to volunteer in your community. Okay? Refuse. Unequivocally.
Yeah.
Do we walk out in the street and see bodies? Okay. Yeah, you can recruit. Now, we have the same problem. Okay? Our messaging's wrong. Our communication's wrong. The fact of the matter is that firefighting is, for a lack of better words, like a very old skill. Okay? There's not a lot of blacksmiths out there anymore. And we are marketing like it is 1840, and we are going to put horseshoes on and fix wagon wheels. And we have got to come out of this archaic, ancient concept that we are going to recruit based on how it worked in 1920, 1950, 1970, 2000. The entire world has changed in the last 22 years, just in the way we communicate alone. How could we not expect our messaging systems to also need to change in the process?
Well, and part of that is just society in general has changed so much. I guarantee you, in 1920, you knew everybody that lived on your street. You knew all their kids' names. You knew their dogs' names. You knew everybody that lived 2 streets over, 3 streets over. You knew all those people, and you talked to them on a semi-regular basis. You knew everything about it. Well, even with all the technology we have to connect us better, you don't know who your neighbors are.
No.
You may not even know who lives directly across the street from you. And not have a clue and not have a care. And it's somewhat self-absorbing, but it's a negative impact on everything around the community, because people are not community driven or community oriented. And you have the the and I call us the fringe. We're the fringe because we're definitely the minority. And you have the other people that are in the minority that are in the other organizations that do community good. And I'd put the Rotarians and some of those other, the Lions Club, in those buckets too, because they're trying to serve a purpose. It's different purpose than ours, but it's a purpose, and they're trying to be part of an organization that has a greater good. But you look back into the 30s, 40s, and 50s, even into the 60s, everybody was a member of something. Whether it be the Elks or whatever it was, everybody was a member of something. How many people do you run into on a daily basis that are not a member of anything?
Oh, the vast majority of people don't belong to anything except for whatever their theoretical church has and whatever sports events their kids drag them to.
Yeah, yeah. And that stuff's great. I'm not taking away from any of that stuff. Most of our members do those things as well. There's more of you to go around than what you think there is. And definitely more of you to go around if you're a positive person and take that positive outlook on things.
Right. Well, one of the best ambassadors for your department is your membership. How bad is that killing you if your membership's running around saying, "Oh, our chief's an absolute hard ass. We just can't get rid of him."
Yeah.
Oh my God.
It happens all the time.
Right.
Happens all the time. And from the same respect, you got to realize if the chief is that guy. What if the chief is that guy? And he truly is the negative force that's feeding your department, because I've seen that too. I've seen that in real life, and it makes life terrible. It takes the thing you love and just crushes it into a little ball and throws it into the trash can, because you can't ever do anything right. You can't, everything's second guessed. And as a guy that was a second in command to a guy that was like that, I can tell you that it takes all the drive to do anything out of you.
Yeah, I've personally witnessed and experienced, I'll just say at the bare minimum, challenging scenarios that were encouraged, in my opinion, by the administration. And I look at it from the perspective of, why on earth do you want to take something that's already all time consuming and make it exponentially worse by significantly contributing to the drama, to whatever problems going on, to not just eating humble pie and just admit that you're wrong, even if you don't think you're not wrong. Just the ability to sit there and say, I'm done dealing with this. If I just admit fault, I can move on and just make my life 10 times easier. And that requires pretty significant compromise, though.
Yeah.
And I definitely won't say that a lot of people are suited for that.
Yeah.
Because that takes kind of a special individual. Not to admit when they're wrong. That's not necessarily a problem. But to admit fault on something just to move on so that we can get past this hurdle.
Well, and when you watch the news or anything else, everything that you see is so divided that aspect of society and that negativism that comes from that political division and the everything else that's going on in the world and all that negativity that's coming at you from the media and everything else, that plays a role in it, because you become complacent with that aggressive or that divide.
Yeah,
It's me against you, and you become part of that machine that keeps feeding that more and more and more.
Yeah, the polarization across the U.S. as a whole, oh, well, you're just blind if you don't think that's not a problem. And, generally anytime you have discussions with anyone new at the department, you always tell them politics and religion are the two things that tread lightly, because everyone's got an opinion on something and they're not going to agree with whatever you think. And then compound it and multiply it by the polarization of the populace. And that's directly in your department. Don't pretend for 1 second that that's not fully saturated throughout your organization, because it is. And not be able to realize that you can have something completely out of your control. You don't control the news cycle. You don't control news events. You don't control current events, local, state, federal, whatever, UN. Okay. And those discussions can absolutely blow up gigantically in your face if you are not careful.
And that grudge that's held a lot of times over those conversations sparks that same divide in your organization. That and it's not just that local interaction of that, but it's the mindset that people are put in by constant exposure to that. You know, if you tell somebody that they're stupid 1,000 times, guess what? They're stupid.
Yeah. Oh, and they'll give up. They'll just give up and accept that they're stupid. And that's what you're going to get. You're going to get stupid on scene. You're going to get stupid at the station. You're going to get stupid in their personal life. You've done absolutely nothing to build the individual up. You've done everything in your power to tear them down. That's the easy part. That's the easiest part.
Well, and not just the individual. You made a conscious effort to destroy your organization
Yeah. Yeah.
because we're an organization built out of individuals. And if you tear half of them down, guess what? You destroyed half of your organization.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
There is no conceivable benefit to someone trying to justify why my organization needs to be run from a negative point of view. Like I have so many positive people that they're delirious and that I have to be negative because I have to bring them back to reality. What? I Come on. It makes no sense.
But it's everywhere all the time. You see it everywhere all the time. And I hate to pick on them, the old guys, because I'm an old guy. But the old guys tend to be the ones that create probably the vast majority of those problems. And those are the guys that have to be super conscious of what they do, what they say, and you may or may not be able to revert them back to a world where they're listened to, but it's their death sentence. If everybody else is, if 90% of your, or 95% of your organization has that positive team environment, and you've got one or two of those outliers, well, they're just writing their own death sentence with their negative attitude, because they're truly, what you want to be in is the position to where your membership. I look at it as an employer. My employees, where my employees can take care of those problems, and I don't have to deal with it, because that's a glorious day when they tell that person, "Hey, we don't look at it that way. Hey, that's uncalled for. Don't do that. Don't say that." When they self-regulate in that aspect, you won.
Right.
That's the winning moment. Because effectively, me or you can't make that happen on our own. It takes all the rest of them to do that.
Right. Well, it's the standard, and it is. It's just an expectation. Probably the last thing that we need to talk about, because we're actually going pretty long on this one. So the classic. I have that guy on my department. I've identified him or her as that's my problem. That guy is killing us. That lady is killing us. Okay. Again, it's not that you want him off the department. I would argue that makes you the villain.
Yep.
In fact, you actually now completely verify their unsubstantiated fears and concerns, that all you're there for is to change it to your way and completely ignore and negate their opinions, issues, concerns, theories, thoughts, on and on. You have to engage them. And it's not just come out of the gate swinging. For the love of God, go talk to them about a baseball game or some other random crap. Find something that you have commonality on, because it's out there. It's out there. Okay. It may be where you guys are exact opposites. diabolically opposed. Okay? Are you literally the unstoppable force meets the immovable object? Or is there no way to find commonality, compromise? You're the one that has to engage them, not them. You're the one that has to engage them. And you will be shocked if you put the time, energy, and effort, and how little time, energy, and effort it actually takes to be able to make a connection with that individual, and then for them to actually understand that you're actually operating on the same damn page. You just have a different way of considering how to achieve it.
Yeah. And when you get down to that truly just obtuse guy that just can't can't say a nice thing about anybody, that's where the rest of the worker bees can convert that person,
Right.
or they'll go away on their own. And we're in a time where you need everybody you can get. Sometimes you got to realize, do I really need that?
Yeah, well, sure. It may be desperate times. I mean, and this is where honesty and directness is the sharpest knife. Okay? You want a sharp knife to cut the cleanest, and being honest is going to give you your sharpest knife. And there are times when you have to, and I've had to do this, there are times when you have to go to someone and physically tell them, this isn't cutting it. It's got to stop. Not tomorrow, not next month. Now. It's done. We are not dealing with this anymore.
Yep. And stay away from the tit for tat and all that other stuff. Just stay plumb clear of that.
Yeah.
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 Direct
If,
and
if you're going to do that, you have better be directly even across the board in that discussion. And you'll get respect and credit for it.
yeah.
You will. But I mean, and I don't want to say that you're on a razor thin edge if you're doing that. There's nothing wrong with the saying, "Hey, we've got a problem. You're the problem. We need to address this. I want you to explain to me why the hell you're doing this, because you're killing me. It's got to stop. We've got to figure this out. What is the problem? You need to give me the solution."
Yep. Yeah. Or what did I do to make you feel this way?
Right. And what can we do to get this fixed? Because frankly, it's taking way too much of my time, energy, or effort to be dealing with this, and I am done dealing with this.
Yeah. Yeah. Because the next phase of that is you're done.
Yeah.
You're done. You either give up or you just go away because you go away.
Yeah.
And you can't let that happen. So, realize that those guys that are like that, they're not necessarily, their motivation is not to destroy your organization. Their motivation is not to always to gain power or prestige or whatever. Sometimes it's just the way that they are or the way that they were brought up into it. Some of that's just that vicious cycle of those dinosaur eggs. And sometimes, and most times, it's not personal. They're not, it's not a personal attack against you or anyone else. It's just they're a product of their environment that they came from.
Right.
And if you look at it from that perspective, it's a lot easier for you to approach it from a rational path and not go on that defensive offensive attack.
The one thing I'll add to this is that again, if you're not engaging them, they may have valid points.
Yeah.
And all they're simply waiting on is the junior chief who's 35 years senior to their experience to come to them to see what the wise old man says. And I know that sounds kind of childish. There's nothing wrong with someone waiting to see what your reaction's going to be as chief. There's nothing wrong with having that test. So don't, again, if you're operating as a chief, what you personally think and feel, as far as I'm concerned, is meaningless, because your personal feelings and values and on, that is not the organization. You are there to represent the organization, to guarantee the continuity of the organization, the success of the organization. And you just are the one that has to usually make the compromise.
Yep. And sometimes the growth and the expansion have to take a back seat to the stabilization.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah, it's pointless if you can't even get the organization to operate functionally.
yep. And keep that in mind and remember that. I hope that there was some takeaways from this because it was a great conversation. And we can beat our drum a little bit that we have enough introspect to look inside ourselves to realize that we don't always do it right. And sharing that with you to know that you don't always do it right. And keep that in mind and go forward and conquer and make your place a better, positive place.
Right.
And with that,
All right. I'm Matt.
I'm Jesse.
You guys have a good evening.
Yeah, tastes like burning.